Welcome back to another episode of the Morning Buzz. Hi, I'm your host, Russell Gahagan, and today I got another angler, a new guest along, again here for the third week in a row, somebody that I've met through the tournament trail, Salmon Showdown sort of tournament scene, and that is Lenny Vaughan from Slipknot Charters out of Manistee, Michigan. Lenny, how you doing today?
Very good. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, so Lenny, I think you and I met quite a few years ago. I don't even know what it is now, 8-10 years ago, something like that, through the tournament trail. I think in particularly maybe when you were fishing with Mark Chimura from Peer Pressure on the Salmon Showdown. Is that sound about right?
We were in the Final Four, and we were all battling it out in Manistee. And, yep, I met you then and your daughter too. And I was pretty taken back how your daughter, was fishing with you on the trail then. And it was pretty awesome to see that. Yeah,
well, actually, the day we're recording this here, as everybody at home probably knows, this is pre-recorded, and we put it out every Sunday. But the day we're recording this is Lily's 14th birthday, so it's kind of crazy how time flies, as she was probably 4, 5, 6 years old at the time when we're talking, and now she's 14 already. But at any rate, as we said, you operate a charter business out of Manistee called Slipknot. Why don't you maybe talk for just a minute or two about, what kind of boat you have, sort of how many days a year you fish. You are out of Manistee, obviously, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I run the 31-foot Tiara out of Manistee. It's an open 1990. And I've been fishing out of Manistee, chartering for 10 years now. And getting back into the tournament scene, my kids, just like yours, are getting a little older. My daughter's 13 and my son, he's 9. So last year we kind of got into fishing the ladies and kids tournaments with them. And so it's kind of making it a little bit nicer getting the family involved in the fishing where I can spend some time while I'm doing all my charters throughout the season, which basically, when you're a charter fisherman, if it's not too rough, you're out on the water. So basically, I'll be doing, every day from May until probably the end of September on the water. So it gives me a little time to see the kids for a couple days. They can come over and visit, wherever we're fishing. So.
Yeah, I think this year I saw you at the Ludington event. I saw you at the Monster in Manistee, and then I saw you there at the end in Frankfurt.
Yep.
Talk a little bit maybe about, for anybody at home that doesn't know, Salmon Showdown came back this year for the first time in quite a while, and you were a part of that. You were actually an integral part. You ended up taking, I believe, second place.
Yeah,
if I'm right.
It was third place. I was in second place up until the end, and there was another team that won Frankfurt, and that they actually slid in front of me and took second place. But yeah, I was right there the whole season, and the Salmon Showdown, I used to fish it with Mark on Peer Pressure, and he's one of probably the most premier fishing guides that are on the Great Lakes. And I was very fortunate enough to be able to fish with him for a number of years on his boat, and it kind of was able to fine-tune fishing skills that I was lacking, that he was able to kind of show me, and it was a great thing being part of that whole Salmon Showdown, the TV show, just meeting all the different teams and having that competition going on week after week.
So that's something I'd like to take a minute and talk to you about before we move on to another subject is, and I found this interesting and strategic by you, and I give you props for that, and that is the difference between the Salmon Showdown and the actual tournaments. And I'm not sure that everybody at home understands that, and that's always something that I really battle with, like inside mentally. So at each event, from all the way from the beginning from Michigan City all the way to the end to Frankfurt, each port has a individual tournament with individual tournament rules. And at each event, that might be catch 10, catch 15, catch 5, whatever, and weigh that amount of fish. But the showdown part of it is only the 333 part of it.
Yep.
So what I noticed was when we went to Ludington, and I actually didn't know this, I just and for everybody at home, it's Christmas break time, so you're going to probably see kids come in the back door here in a second, and and walk through. So for everybody at home, one of the struggles, like for me at Ludington, for example, was we were also participating in this Salmon Showdown thing, and to some level, I guess I would say, not as much as you were. But, we were part of the 333, and we signed up, for the Founders Cup Team of the Year deal. It was a tough decision because we were there also to fish the main event. And the main event, you have to weigh 9 and 3. So 2 different species. Right. You got to catch 12 fish. So we couldn't really just focus specifically on kings only, where you decided to not fish the main event and just fish the 333 for that particular event.
Correct.
So talk a little bit about, kind of how you're handling that. And are you really in this for the Salmon Showdown? Are you in it to fish some of the tournaments as well, or vice versa, or kind of like how that's working for you?
Yeah, what I do is, being a charter fisherman, I try to get charter clients to do the tournaments with me. And in some cases, when I roll it out to the clients to fish the 2 days, I'll let them know that we can either fish the main tournament, and there's an entry fee there, which basically I split the winnings with the charter clients. They'll pay the entry fees, and I split the winnings with them. So I kind of let them, decide whether we're going to fish the main event and the 333 and all the side tournaments, or if they just want to fish, the 333, because that's what I was mainly there for, is to get points. In Ludington, you have some of the best fishermen on Lake Michigan that usually come to that tournament. It's just kind of like centrally located in the lake where Wisconsin guys can shoot across. The guys from the south, they only have to come up about 80 miles, or the guys from the north. So it's just a really great event on the trail. And so this year, the clients that I had, they didn't want to get involved in the main tournament. And that was kind of nice for me, because then I could just focus on kingfishing the whole tournament. And in turn, second guessing it, the first day I went out, I probably, if I would have been in the main tournament, I would have probably been in first place by a long shot. I caught 14 fish. I caught lake trout, the 3. I caught some big kings. And so, I was looking at it like, oh man, I really messed up not getting in the main event. So, you kind of got to second guess yourself sometimes, but you got to commit to one program, what tournament you're fishing. So.
And kind of in a, looking at it from another angle, I actually went lake trout fishing because I didn't have enough confidence in Ludington that we could boat 9 kings. I went lake trout fishing. So I pretty much threw myself right out of the 333 race at that particular event, which threw us out for the season because we were only fishing 3 events. So that really, I guess, why I brought it up is it opened my eyes a little bit when I talked to you and you fished the 333 only. I was like, well, going forward, I got to make some decisions. I'll fish the Ludington tournament this year no matter what. What that means is we may just fish that instead of, or we may fish a different event instead of that one for the 333 part.
Yeah. And this year it's going to be a little bit different. I don't know if you've heard the format. They're going to go with, you can enter 4 tournaments in the 333 tournament series, the Founders Cup, and you can keep your 3 best. So unlike these last 2 previous years where you could fish 10 events and keep your 3 best, teams are going to have to know what 4 events they're going to want to fish, knowing that they can only keep 3 of those scores. So, in your case, it could make it a little bit easier for you to decide, hey, I'm just going to fish the 333 this tournament and use it for one of my Founders Cup scores. So moving forward, that'll make some changes, on people, what they do.
Well, I'll tell you, I won't do that no matter what, because I'm there to fish the big tournament, and I kind of let the 333 part of it just work itself out.
Right.
It's actually one of my proudest accomplishments, I guess I should say, is when we made the championship 4 years in a row. I pretty much could say, not that I remember, did we ever specifically fish the 333. We pretty much always tried to win the tournaments and then let the 333 come with it.
Yeah.
And, we had some success winning some tournaments too, but and I think we took second or third in Ludington one year and yada, 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 and just happened to get lucky and get a good score.
Yep.
But, it just, for me, the main tournaments are really what I'm interested in, and I'll participate in the Salmon Showdown and the 333 as well,
yep.
But I'm really there to fish the main events. So let's talk a little bit about Manistee, Ludington. Kind of, I lump them together because they're they're close. But Manistee in particular, because that's where you fish. One of the things that I think the people at home, especially from Wisconsin, don't understand, because when you're from Wisconsin and you fish out of Sheboygan or you fish out of Port Washington or Manitowoc, for the most part, most of us are accustomed to, I call it a 5 mile box, right? We basically go 5 miles out, 5 miles north, or 5 miles south. And that's pretty much it. Like if you're a charter fisherman, especially, like that's the box you fish in on a daily basis for the most part.
Yeah.
And if you live in Ludington or Manistee, that's not the case.
No.
You guys have some of the best fishing / places to fish on Lake Michigan, in my opinion, meaning Big Point Sable, the shelf out of Manistee. If you're from Ludington, Little Point Sable, and then if you're from Manistee, the trout grounds, quote unquote, to the north of Manistee. You have some really good areas, but they're not very close to Manistee. So obviously, last year with gas prices being the way they are and things like that, I'm sure you guys are being maybe slightly more conservative than you generally are, but probably not to too much. I think you guys go to where you need to go to fish. Talk a little bit about that, all those different areas you got to fish and how you play that on a daily basis.
Yeah, Ludington and Manistee, we have probably a 14-mile box that we play in. So if I'm going out of Manistee, if I go 14 miles to the south, I'm at Big Sable Point. If I go 14 miles to the north, I'm right out, almost out of front of Arcadia. So you got 28 miles that you can fish going out of Manistee. And then basically we only have to go probably 3 to 4 miles straight out. So, it depends on what you're targeting, what time of the year you're in. And my good friend Mark, when he would fish, and he's the winner of, the Ludington tournament 2 different separate times, or even 3 times, I think it was, where he's won the main event there and done really well in the 3-3-3. He would run from Ludington all the way up to the trout grounds, which is outside of Onekama. And, like you said, you just throw caution to the wind and you're going to go and try to catch your 12 fish. This past year, fishing the 3-3-3, I knew there was some big kings at Big Point, and I also know you can catch a few lake trout there. So I kept it real simple, only going 7 miles to the north of Ludington, and just basically grinded it out there the whole day on the shelf there right off the point. So it's a unique situation that we have where there's a lot of trout to the north of Manistee and a lot of salmon to the south of us and straight out.
Well, that's not even just a tournament. I mean, that's a day-to-day decision for you as far as charter fishing goes. I mean, you basically head out of Manistee, and I give you credit because I would struggle with that decision on a daily basis because I love fishing all of them.
Yeah.
I really do. And I love Manistee. It's probably my favorite port on the entire lake, and I say that often. It'd be that or Ludington, to be honest with you. And I'd have a hard time deciding on a daily basis. Do I want to go out and fish the shelf? Do I want to go down and fish Big Point, or do I want to go up and fish trout? Because there's a lot of times some really big kings hanging in that area where those trout.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I always ask my clients, every day, and even before, do you guys want to catch a lot of fish, meaning trout, or do you want to catch big fish and kings? And for the most part, as a charter fisherman, most of my clients want to catch kings. And there's sometimes the year, mainly like that 4th of July weekend, leading those 2 weeks leading up into the tournament in Ludington, where the kings kind of sometimes they're gone, they're not there. And that is kind of how I base my trips every day, is what the people want to fish, my clients, and what I expect to catch the most of. So I kind of leave it up to my clients, and I just kind of keep where I know the fish are, each species, so I can get whatever they want.
So I'm going to give you a little pat on the back here, but don't get too big of a head now, because I don't do this kind of thing too often. But I consider you, and I'm going to say this, I hope I don't hurt anybody's feelings, but not too many fishermen impress me. I guess I've played in some pretty big pools of really good fishermen in both the salmon and the walleye game. So I don't really walk away from too many tournaments or situations and go, boy, that guy's really good. But Lenny, you're really good.
Well,
And kudos to you for working hard and getting to that level. You're a hell of a fisherman. So I give you some credit for that. You've impressed me over the years. And one of the things I like about you, or say that for, is you're out there in the fall when everybody else is hung it up for the most part. I mean, you're there till
yeah.
November, cracking on them kings yet, showing pictures of limits and everything else. Talk for a minute maybe about that fall bite this year. And the reason I bring that up really is just in introduction for what you're expecting next year, because that's really that's what we got next year. You're catching a bunch of these fish we're going to have next year. So talk about what you've seen this fall, what the sizes of them were, how many were around, and what you're kind of expecting for fishing overall for 2023.
Yeah, basically what happens is, in the fall, usually once middle of September comes, most of the guys are starting to wind down their charters. People are, the holidays over with, everybody's going back to school. And what happens is not many people go out fishing. Well, once again, I mean, kudos to my good friend Mark. He does basically and did the same thing I do. I stay on the lake until the weather forces me off. And I learned all that from him, staying out there, because the fishing is so great. When the water starts transitioning down, the temperature starts mixing and the lake temperature starts falling. And those kings and the 2-year-olds, the 1-year-olds, the 3-year-olds, they're all out there still for the taking. I mean, they live out there. And so you just got to kind of watch the temperatures of the water, make sure that you're in the right spot, with the temperature zones, and you can catch tons of fish when everybody else is pretty much hung it up for the year. And, what I've seen this year is a ton of 2-year-olds, a ton of 1-year-olds, and a 3-year class that is going to replicate what we just went through this past year. So, moving forward, I see, really bright future for our salmon fishery for the next 3 years.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Now, my experience with you and the conversations with you have led me to believe that you're a king fisherman at heart.
Yeah.
That's what you like to do and specialize in. I don't really take you as a multi-species guy. I don't take you as a lake trout guy. Not saying you can't catch those.
Right.
Just saying that you spend most of your time trying to catch king salmon.
Yes.
And with that, what was that?
Yeah, that's 100% accurate. I'll target kings, 90% of the time when I go out fishing. I mean,
what I find interesting about you in that particular case is you are very different from most of the other Michigan guys. Now, this is an observation, so don't take this, if I'm wrong, feel free to definitely point it out. But my observation is you're not much of a spoon guy as well.
Yeah, I mean, spoons in the springtime, being May, all the way through May, they have a place, and I do use them quite often, on boards. The water temperature in May typically is, 40 degrees on the surface, and it slowly warms up throughout May. By the end of the May, you may be 45, 46 degrees. And once, that lake temperature warms up to 47, 48, my spoon presentation is pretty much gone for the rest of the summer.
So let's quit beating around the bush.
Yeah.
When it comes time to catch kings, you're putting the spoons away.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the situation, right?
Yes. I mean, spoons, they definitely have a place. I mean, and they catch fish. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've caught tons and tons of kings on spoons. But when I'm targeting kings, I'm basically, using a 4 to 6 rod spread, and that's it. I'm using divers and downriggers.
So you and I are very similar in that manner, and that's why I brought it up. For years and years and years, I have, and I say this to people all the time, and I think I said this to you not that long ago. I consider myself a flasher fly expert. I'm good enough with meat, and I'm good enough with spoons to be, competitive, but they're not my expertise. And it's mainly because I've always tried to target kings in comparison to multi-species, whatever the case may be. Talk a little bit about, like you just said, you're more of a downrigger and diver guy.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, what your average spread looks like, and maybe talk a little bit about just like on an average July or August day, are you going to have one big paddle with a fly, a couple of meat rigs, and another small paddle with fly, or what's kind of your average spread?
Yeah, basically, I look at, Lake Michigan when I'm fishing it, there's like 2 segments from May until October that I fish with and fish in. May and June is when the water is transitioning and it's getting warmer. And so as that's happening, the kings are relating to that temperature in Lake Michigan. And so basically, I'm using spoons and flashers and flies in May and early June. Once June's over with, then I'll transition to basically just meat from July and August. That's the meat time for me. And how I present those are basically I run 2 downriggers, and I don't have 3 downriggers on my boat, and everybody just like freaks out about that. They're like, "Why don't you have 3 riggers on your boat? You got to have a shoot rigger." And to me, I've been on Lake Michigan for basically 35 years fishing, and the lake has completely changed, as we all know that. But basically, what I've realized is, putting 3 downriggers down in a 14-foot area is just too much. So I basically will run 1 deep rigger with a big paddle and a fly. And that one, will be 100 to 200 foot down. And what I'm doing is I'm basically using that to suck up fish from the deep water into my spread. And so my other downrigger, that one that's totally out of temperature. If it's 200 foot down, it may be 40 degrees down there. And my other rigger, I keep that in temp, which is 47, 49 degrees on my other downrigger. And that one, I'll either run a J plug on in August, or I'll run a flasher fly on that one just to kind of, see if the fish are into the flies. And then my other dipsy rods, the 2 spread on each side, are usually meat. So, what I usually do is I stagger them. One side will be a little bit deeper with the divers. The other side will be a little bit shallower. So once I get those fish up into my spread, then I can kind of see where they're comfortable, where they're settling in that water temperature, based on where they are in that water column.
Are there days that you go out there and they just don't want meat?
Oh yeah, for sure. Sometimes with meat, when you're running meat, as we kind of all know, speed can be a big factor. With our currents, last year we had, tremendous currents over here in Manistee, Ludington area. Probably the worst currents I've ever seen. And sometimes when you're fishing with a meat program and those currents are ripping the way they are, you just can't get that roll the right way. And it's better to go a little faster with the current. So last year I noticed that there was more of a flasher fly bite than probably ever before. And I used flasher flies probably more than I ever did, it was really working really, really well, flasher flies.
And that's because you feel like you just couldn't present the meat in the way that
Yeah,
you wanted to be able to.
correct.
So let me ask that same question now in a different way. When there's no currents and you can present meat the way you want to, is there ever a time you feel like it doesn't work?
Yeah, there can be times. Water temperature can make a huge, difference. If the water's flipped over, and you're talking, it's only 45 degrees on the surface and 40 degrees 50 foot down. I've noticed that that meat program can sometimes take a back seat to even spoons at that time. You can never put all your eggs in one basket when you're out there fishing every day. You have to have it and be able to read the water, and the fish will tell you what they want. So there are days when literally plugs, J plugs will outperform anything when the water sometimes cold is a little bit cooler and flipped over, and those fish are just a little bit more up in the upper water column, and that plug is just irritating them. So you can never really just say I'm going to run all meat, all flies. You got to throw a little bit out there sometimes.
Okay. So this year in particular, you obviously you fished a lot. You fished a lot throughout the entire year. Let's talk just kind of, normal midsummer, July, August type time frame, July and early August. Was there anything in particular that you felt like, and I'm not even talking necessarily like specific color wise, but just what was kind of your go-to setup this year? Was it, meat on wires? Was it, a big paddle on a rigger? If there was something where you were like day in and day out, I could put this on down and I knew I was going to get bit, charter fishing, tournament fishing, kind of what was that for you?
I would definitely say without a doubt, hands down this year, there was a flasher 8-inch, just a regular 8-inch chrome with some glow tape on the one side with some green on it, and basically a green fly that was just hands down by far the best, from May all the way through. So, and I think it had a lot to do with just the clarity of the water. This year, it was really clean. Like I said, there was a lot of current over there where I was fishing out of Manistee this year, and the water conditions were just more favorable for a flash or fly program this year.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Let's talk a little bit about. So, what do you got planned for the Salmon Showdown for this upcoming year? Are you planning on participating in it again? And if you are, what 4 events do you plan on fishing?
Yeah, I plan on doing it again. I mean, I like the whole Salmon Showdown format. I mean, it's nice to be able to go and catch 3 big fish over 2 days and just kind of focus on that. Um, and of course, I mean, I enjoy doing the TV shows. I mean, especially with my buddy Mark. I mean, it's not like fishing unless he's on the boat because he's a hoot. But I plan on fishing 4 events this year probably, and that being Manistee 2 of them, Frankfurt 1, and I'm kind of up in the air whether I'm going to do Muskegon instead of Ludington this year. I enjoyed doing Ludington this year, but it's really challenging when you're up against 100 boats that are in the 333 to finish in the top 5. I mean, you have to be catching some really big fish, and beyond big fish. I mean, I was on good fish this year, but they were the low 20 pounders, and there wasn't a whole lot of those 25 to 30 pounders this year. And that's what you need for, the Salmon Showdown, the 333 is those 25 plus pounders.
Absolutely. If you had a couple of pieces of advice for people at home that were looking to fish tournaments, what would those be? And again, I'm not looking for you to give any secrets away. Just, a couple pieces of advice. Guys are going to fish their first couple tournaments this coming year. They're thinking about getting into the tournaments. Kind of what would you tell them to make sure they do or don't do to try to be, to some level successful?
Yeah, I mean, what I would do if you're just going to get into it and you want to fish a couple events or 3 events, first of all, social media is huge now. We all know you can go on and you can kind of track people, on Facebook. You can become friends with other, guys that are out there every day. You can kind of know what events leading up to them, what the fishing is. A lot of people will set themselves up and they'll go say, I'm going to fish, Manistee, this, the monster. And the week prior to it's just terrible fishing, and they go there and they don't even catch any fish at all. And so my advice is, before you fish a tournament, just kind of see what the fishing is like, and whether you're comfortable committing to doing a tournament where you might not catch a lot of fish. And a lot of people will do a few of them, they don't do well, and they never do them again. And you got to be committed to fishing the tournaments, and just whatever happens, but you do your homework a little bit before you go into a certain tournament.
I know you're at Mark's shop.
Yeah.
You can kind of see that in the background, and I see you smiling over the top of you once in a while. So Mark's lurking somewhere in that background. I'm not going to give any of Mark's deep, dark secrets away that I lured out of him 15 or 20 years ago in Kenosha, Wisconsin at the Jelensky Sports Show. I'm going to do him a favor and not give those away. But I'm sure he's cautiously lurking over the top of that computer screen, making sure you're not giving any deep, dark secrets away.
Fishing, I really enjoy the fact that, I have people come up to me down at the dock, just like you have for years. They'll come up and they'll take pictures of my catch, and they'll come down there and they'll ask questions. And most of them are fishermen that, they have their own boat up, and they just want to go out and catch a few fish. And I really like that about the whole fishing industry, is where, there's tournaments, but there's also, everybody needs to go out and enjoy catching fish. Even the local, anglers will come down and say, hey, I'm not catching anything. What are you doing? And so when I say, going on Facebook or even sending someone a message, if you're friends with that, is catching fish, I'll respond probably to 20 people in the course of a week. And they'll ask, I just want to go out and catch a couple fish with my kids. Can you give me some advice? The advice is just, check out Facebook and ask questions. Don't be afraid to call up or even message someone that's doing well. and say, hey, what's the hot bite, on right now? What flash or fly combo is it? That to me is, what this fishing industry has to have, because the world really needs to be exposed to what we have here, or it'll fade away, over time if people aren't exposed to it.
You bring up a really great point, Lenny, that I try to talk about a lot in seminars and salmon schools that I give. And what that really is that getting from zero, like if I would rate Fisherman as 1 to 10, and let's just say I'm putting you, me, Mark, a bunch of these other really, really great fishermen as a 10, right? And somebody who's just starting today that's never gone salmon fishing before is a 0. So we're using a 0 to 10 scale. I tell people all the time, I can help them very easily get from 0 to about 7.
Yep.
Actually, really fast, really easily, with some knowledge, the right gear, et cetera, et cetera. But getting from 7 to 10 is the difficult part. And that's really where I think colors of lures and types of swivels and, some of the real nitty gritty, small detailed stuff that most people don't pay attention to make all the difference in the world when you get to a 7.
Yeah.
But you got to get there first. You know what I mean? So I do always laugh. I mean, don't get me wrong. I sell tackle for a living. So tackle is very important. And I think you'll sit there and say that yourself. Having the right tackle on your rods is critical. But if that's all you worry about, you're probably not going to catch a lot of fish. You got to get all those other things down. And then when you get to that point, you start to really look at the finite details of the tackle, and you can really up your catch rate, at that point once you've dialed in all the rest of that stuff that you and I take for granted.
Oh, for sure. I mean, a bait will only go so far. I mean, I have it time and time again where people, they'll find out what I'm using. One of my buddies will leak it or whatever, and next thing I know, there's 10 boats using the same thing, and half of them aren't catching fish on it. Well, it's not the bait's fault that they're not catching the fish on it. It's the presentation of the bait, the speed, just all those little variables that you were saying that make a difference between 7 and 10 on that scale. So you have to pay attention to the small details. And boat control, this year, the last 2 years, I've been using, the new product that Mark came out with, the 360 rod holders. And, everybody says, why can a rod holder make you a better fisherman? Well, the rod holder may not make you a better fisherman by itself, but it's all the other things that come along that you're doing while you're using the rod holder. And I don't know if you watched the tournament show, the couple I was in this year. They really didn't show how, you can utilize a rod holder that you can clear your rods without having to take them out of the rod holders. They didn't show stuff. And those are the things, the little variables that can make you a 9 to a 10 or a 5 to an 8 very quickly. Is those little things, if you got a downrigger, that you utilize the downrigger correctly. You're using your downrigger, not just leaving it at 100 foot the whole day. A downrigger, and dipsy divers are two versatile setups that you can move those around to different depths so quickly, and you can find those fish quicker with those two setups than you can with a 300 copper or a 200 copper, where they're just basically in a 10-foot zone. So, those are, the lure selections are really critical. Don't get me wrong, but there's other little variables that come into play. And like I said, a rod holder has really changed me over the last 2 years more than I can even believe it did. How I can actually control my back deck so much easier with that rod holder.
I ask this question to almost every person that I interview from Michigan. So I'm going to ask you, because this is a long debated conversation for Wisconsin guys and Michigan guys. Why do spin doctors work so good in Michigan and do not work very well in Wisconsin? And I want to be careful I say that. I'm not saying that you can't catch fish on spin doctors in Wisconsin. I'm just saying you come to this side of the lake and it is almost exclusively 8-inch paddles. And you go to the other side of the lake and it's, heavily spin doctors. Yeah. Now, I used to think, well, it's because Dreamweaver's from Michigan. They're from Ludington, so everybody uses them. I thought that early on. And then I started fishing them myself and realized that I'd go home and didn't catch very much on a spin doctor. I'd literally drive my boat 60 miles, east, and put them in the water, and bang, 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 it would happen. I asked the same question because I have a theory. Some people agree with me, some people don't. What's your take on why spin doctors tend to work so good on your side of the lake, but don't seem to work other places as good as they do there?
Well, I mean, I really don't have a valid reason for that. I do know that the one time I fished in Wisconsin waters, I was fishing with Mark, and we had a beautifully calm day, and it was back in the tournament where the Budweiser, and we decided to go over to Sheboygan to fish. And we drove, 68 miles one way to Sheboygan, and we get there, and there is like 60 boats all just lined up out there. And we get there, and we're out in 220 foot of water. And basically, we put down all spin doctors in Wisconsin waters, and we had gotten information that there was some good kings there, and we destroyed the fish there on spin doctors. And because I've heard the same thing that you've been saying by many anglers, and we caught a ton of fish there using them. So over here, the only thing I can, maybe take it as why it's a factor where they work really well over here is our currents are a lot different than your currents over in Wisconsin. Our current flow, if you look at the current map, which I do every day, I notice the currents are always flowing in a different direction than what ours are. And the fish, when they're sitting with those currents, like I told you, this year, the spin doctors didn't work very well for me because the currents were so strong. And I noticed you guys have some strong currents over there. The day we went over there and we did really well, there was no current at all, hardly over there. So, I would have to say the only thing I can, maybe look at it as is the currents and how they flow, those spin doctors roll in the currents can make a difference. Because I noticed this year they didn't work as well over here when the currents were really bad here.
It's a great point. That's a different one than I've heard from other people before. It's always just a fun thing for me to ask because it's a heavily debated topic both on Lake Michigan and on Lake Ontario, because uniquely enough on Lake Ontario, they see a lot of the same similarities. On one end, they all use, paddle-style flashers. On the other end, they all use spin doctors.
Yeah.
And, they have their reasoning for it and why, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's always just a question for me that I'm curious to know. So the Salmon Showdown just aired the final episode in Frankfurt,
yep.
Right? So we'll touch a sore subject here for a minute. So you were not able to capitalize at the end on the win. You did mention that you took third. Let's talk for a minute about that final day, because I don't know that Salmon Showdown really – I got some inside scoop here, so I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know that Salmon Showdown or the TV show really gave the best example of how your final day was, but – you can talk a little bit about how that day went, how that tournament went, but in particularly what I want to know is, did Mark not have the winning fish on the rod at one point on Sunday?
The show, I mean, when I watched it for the first time, I was just like, I was kind of mean to Mark, because I was kind of frustrated that we lost a fish. And, I would have to say, yeah, that fish that did pull off, that just came off, that wasn't Mark's fault. It really wasn't his fault. He did everything right. Was definitely a 25 plus pound fish. So yeah, we did have one that would have completely changed it. And that's, how fishing is it's always that one fish that can make or break a tournament. And that one fish actually, destroyed the whole season, in a sense. But we had a great tournament. We fished two different worlds. The first day we were down by Onekama, fishing the barrel. I was on some fish down there, great fishing, and then the blow happened, which I talked about, rolled the water over, and those fish just basically, they started running, for the pier heads. And we did really well. We caught a lot of fish. I think we caught 12 that day, but they were all those 15, 16, 17-pound cookie cutters. We couldn't get into those, those big 20, 25-pounders that were there. So day two, we moved, and we went up to north of the Point Betsy, up in the bay, East Bay, and we found some fish, and we were on fish. I mean, we caught probably 13 fish that day too, and it was so disheartening to catch one big one right away, and then we had a couple cracks at a few decent ones, and the one that we had pretty much just about settled down just pulled the hook on us. So yeah.
one thing I've always believed in, and I've promoted this at my salmon schools and my seminars, is you really. I'm not a believer in the fact that you can lose a fish by doing something wrong, other than at the back of the boat.
Right.
And I say that because of my charter fishing background, just like yours, just like Mark's. I've watched some people do everything wrong, by the book,
Yeah.
and we catch it, right? And then I watch the next person do exactly everything the way you told them to do it, and it falls off.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I always used to say to Lily and my tournament teammates, if they swallow it to their butthole, we will catch them.
Yep.
And if they've got it on the edge of their mouth like jewelry, we're going to lose them. That's just the way it is. But I had to throw that in there a little bit for Mark, because I know that he got a couple cracks there at the end. You could see that on the TV. I knew that inside scoop too, that he had a couple cracks at it, and that you guys felt that one of those might be the winner. But what it really proves is that I don't care how good you are and how long you've been doing this, and Mark's been doing it as long as anybody, and he's as good as they come. The fish have to play along.
Oh, for sure.
There's some luck involved. You got to put yourself in position and do all the things right. But at the end of the day, there's a luck factor on if that thing swims up and swallows the hook or gets the edge of it. I mean, that's just part of how it works.
Yeah. When they take, a piece of cut bait, and they're going to eat it. And we know when they eat it, it's down in their mouth. I mean, all the way down, buried almost to their throat, in the gills. They're eating it. And as those fish get, closer to running the rivers like they were then, their sense of urgency to eat is starting to be it's a natural reaction that they do. So basically they're going to go into the rivers, and they're not going to have a full stomach. Very few times do I clean my fish with fish that are staged, that have tons of bait in their stomach. It's a process that they slowly go through, and they start eating less and less and less. And when you're fishing that last week of August, a lot of times you get a lot of those aggressive strikes that are just kind of natural, that they're used to doing, but they're not actually eating it in their deep, like you said. And those hooks get hooked on the outside of their mouth, and like you said, you can baby them, but eventually the hook just pulls, and that's what happens as you get later in the season. I noticed a lot more.
You brought up a point that I talk a lot about with friends and family and stuff, and other fellow fishermen that just don't understand this fact, and that is, I'll hear a guy, or I'll see a guy on Facebook or social media or in the public or at the dock or whatever, and he's holding a 33-pound king in June, and he's going, imagine what this thing would be in September. And my answer is usually like 27 pounds. And they look at me like I'm absolutely insane. And I have to explain to them that once they get into August and September and they start focusing on the spawn and everything else, eating becomes a secondary thing to them. They're not worried about eating anymore like they are their entire life, where they're eating machines day in and day out. And it goes into the fact of exactly what you just said, which is, in reality, as they get further along in their maturation process, they change the way they eat, and it becomes to a point at the end where it's just a reactionary thing. It's not even a hunger thing anymore.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of luck involved, around that harbor bite and that fall fishery, on whether you hook up with those fish or not, because they're not biting for the right reasons anymore.
Yeah. That's what I've noticed myself too. Yeah.
So you're at a time frame now where you're kind of taking a break a little bit, I would say, right? That would be accurate. You fished until November. Now you're out of the water December, January, February, and then you're going to go back in March, or kind of what's the program now?
Yeah, basically, I do steelhead charters all winter long, starting pretty much in November and going until the first week of March. So I'll do a couple charters, steelhead charters on the river with my riverboat. But yeah, this is kind of like downtime where I can just kind of like regroup, spend some time with the family, get the big boat. I was actually working on it the last couple of days. I got some improvements. They're working on it inside, so it's in heated. So yeah, this is the time of year where I tell everybody it's really important to kind of like prepare for the upcoming season. And with COVID, it used to be where you could go down and you could order, 5 or 6 of your hot baits, and you would think, hey, if I lose them, I can get some more. But now with COVID and in the supply chain, I tell everybody, it's more crucial to really prepare, getting maybe, double the flashers that you normally do. And I've been doing that and preparing for the whole year. So when you get into the heat of battle and you can't find them, you still at least can go into the tub and say, okay, I got them, because it's not like you're not going to use them eventually. It's better to buy more of a hot flasher that you've been knowing has been good for the last 2 years and have 10 of them than to have 2 of them. So that's what I kind of do in the off season, is just go through all my inventory, get all the rods all completely redone. And that way, when I start the new year, I'm completely, it's game on and I don't have to worry about all that stuff.
Well, it's an exciting time of year for me as well, because we're going to start introducing a lot of our new stuff with Salmon Candy. Matter of fact, when this comes out, it'll actually come out, I think, the day before. We're going to release our 7 new 8-inch flasher colors for 2023. Those are going to get released Monday, January 2nd, so next Monday. And then basically weekly after that, we're going to release new product after new product after new product. And obviously, because of my friendship with you and because of the fact that you run some of our stuff and help us a little bit with some thoughts and opinions, you're aware of some of the stuff that's coming. And I think I can say at least that we share in the excitement for 2023 and what the potential can bring, both for yourself, for myself, and for just the fishing community, of the success that they can have catching king salmon out on Lake Michigan next year.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like I said, there was so much gloom and doom for like the last 5 years on the whole salmon fishery. Everybody was saying it's going to be like Ontario. It's going to have its real good years, and it's just going to kind of fade. And Ontario's come back quite strong too over the last couple of years. But I think really, we got a good future. The stocking program is starting to go up a little bit. Our bait has definitely increased, probably 4-fold over the last 5 years. So I think our fishing is going to be good, and it's going to be business as usual. So
tell people at home where they can find you as far as your charter business, maybe your social media, if they want to contact you to book a charter, or they want to contact you to see if you'll help them out with a little fishing information. Let people know at home where they can find you.
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on Facebook, Slipknot Charters on Facebook, or you can just find me, Lenny Vaughan, on Facebook. I'm also have a webpage, Slipknot Charters. You can go there and find all the information about my charters. Or you just Google me and get my number. That'll work out too. So.
Absolutely. Well, if you're looking to book a trip and you're looking to go fishing out of Manistee, Lenny would be a great option to get out there and go fishing with. He's one of the premier fishermen on Lake Michigan. I appreciate you taking the time with us this week, Lenny, to just sit back and talk fishing. And that's really what this Morning Buzz episode's about. We don't really run a structured deal here or anything. It's just a couple of guys talking fishing, getting excited for what's coming here in the future, the up-and-coming 2023 season. And I look forward to not only seeing you hopefully this winter, maybe at some of the shows and different things, but also before we know it, we'll blink a few times and it's going to be April or May, and we'll be out there chasing fish again and probably see you I know I'll see you at the Triport tournament for sure if I don't see you before then.
Oh yeah, and I'm just real excited about coming on board with Salmon Candy. I mean, you make a great product, one of the best flashers. The color schemes are just unreal. So I'm extremely excited about coming on board, and like I said, I will definitely, let everybody know what's working. And that's one thing I try to do, is make sure whatever I put out there after the tournaments that I've done well, it's there for everyone to it. Like I said, to go ahead and get it and utilize it. Because quite honestly, the old way of thinking of where everybody needs to keep everything, hush hush. I mean, that kind of happens to a degree. But at the same token, I mean, we all have to enjoy a resource, and otherwise, every state's not going to even worry about it anymore. They're just going to let it fade into the shadows. So,
yeah, the one that taught me about it the most recently was a color called Megatron, which is one of our colors that I developed a few years ago, and probably like 10 years ago now. But I mean, and I'll tell you why that taught me was that color caught on, and there was more guys fishing that up and down the entire lake shore on your side of the lake. I mean, all kinds of guys just everywhere. Hundreds and hundreds of guys were using Megatron at the same time, and it didn't slow down at all. Right. Everybody was fishing them on it. So I'm in full agreement with you when it comes tournament time and people are investing in a tournament and they want to try to win. I always have respect for individuals that want to keep something under their collar for that particular weekend or event. And then, like yourself, when the tournament's over, you're willing to release what was working for you and tell people what was going on so they can catch some fish and catch more fish as well. So,
Yep.
Again, this is Russell Gahagan from the Morning Buzz. I'm your host. We had Lenny Vaughn from Slipknot Charters out of Manistee on for this week's episode. We had a great time. Next week, we will have Scott McDonald from Tournament Trail on. We'll be talking Tournament Trail updates, what's coming up with Tournament Trail and Salmon Showdown for 2023. But one more time, thank you very much, Lenny. Appreciate it. And
Thanks
this
for
is this episode of the Morning Buzz.